How's everybody doing? Let's light up the darkness. When the show started, I was doing a little mental calculation. I'll explain in a moment. Who's in the house? Yehudit. Nancy in North Carolina, Lucy in Minnesota, Paul is in the house, Joseph in Massachusetts, Sharon in New Jersey. Practicing Eicha that she's going to be chanting tomorrow, the Book of Lamentations. Going to talk about that in a moment. Paul is here, Shandor in the Bronx, Bella in Florida, and Sharon asks, is there class tomorrow night? No, there is not. So we'll just mention that right now. Here's the deal. On Tisha B'Av, which begins tomorrow night, there's no Torah study. Well, we can read passages from Scripture and from the tradition that are sad and related to the destruction of the first and second temples and the other calamities in history that happened on the 9th day of Av, which is what we're commemorating starting tomorrow night. Now, there's a minhag, a custom, that the practices which are prohibited on Tisha B'Av are also prohibited from the middle of the day, Chatzos, which is halachic midday, which tomorrow begins at 1 p.m., at least here in LA. So from then on, we wouldn't do Torah study. There are some exceptions to that. If you would be doing nothing otherwise, and it's a regular Torah study, you might do it. So I thought about doing it. But, there's so many of members of our class who are, on the East Coast, where it would definitely already be Tisha B'Av when we're having our class at 6 p.m. So I just think it would be inappropriate for us to have our class tomorrow learning Talmud. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to have our regularly scheduled session tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific, but we'll make that a reading in English of the Book of Lamentations. So we're going to do our annual reading of the Book of Lamentations at 6 p.m. tomorrow. And then on Tisha B'Av itself, Thursday, no class, right? On the fast day, we won't have the class at all. And then we'll resume on Friday at our regular Friday time of noon Pacific. Or as close to it as possible, because thank God I'm scheduled to get these sutures and the putty out of my mouth from the oral surgery that I had last week, okay? So tomorrow night, we'll have class, but not to study the next daf, rather to read the Book of Lamentations. Thursday, no class, and resume on Friday. Okay. Who else is in the house? Bella in Florida. Oh, and I said that. Tom in PA. Okay, people are answering questions. Very good. Karen in Northern California. David in Indiana. Belle in Texas. Ryan in Jacksonville. As well as Ella and Eve in Florida. Lynn, not in North Texas, but in Maryland. And Marjorie in Georgia. Welcome, everybody. Since this is going to be our last daf for a couple of days, I'm happy to say, fascinating. Tonight's page, and that's why we're not doing multiple pages, even though we're a few pages behind. Tonight, we're going to give this page and this first Mishna in chapter 7 its due. Wow, it is so colorful, so rich, so interesting. You're gonna love it. Okay, let us enjoy our learning tonight. We are opening chapter 7 here in Tractate Gittin, the 19th volume of the Talmud. Generally speaking, the laws of divorce. But we've already seen how this tractate is apt to go on digressions. No exception today. Okay, chapter 7 begins probably about halfway down the page on 67b, or not even halfway down. So we're doing kind of 1.5 pages tonight anyway. Okay, so Mishnah number 1 of chapter 7. In the case of one who was afflicted with temporary insanity, and the word for this is kordiakos. Kordiakos. We'll come back to that. So in the case of one who was afflicted with temporary insanity, passing insanity, and he said, write a bill of divorce, write a get for my wife, he said nothing because he was not lucid at the time. If he said, write a get for my wife when he was lucid, and then he was afflicted with this passing insanity, and he retracted his previous statement, and he said, do not write it. So his later statement is considered to be nothing, i.e. it is not halakhically valid. So we see the principle. If we can truly determine that a person has some kind of temporary insanity, okay, so then whatever he says during that period has no halakhic, no legal significance because he's not himself. He wouldn't do that if he wasn't ill with this passing insanity. And the Mishnah continues, in a case where the husband became mute, so he's not able to speak, and two people said to him, shall we write a get for your wife? And he nodded his head, indicating his agreement. So they examined him with various questions 3 times. And if he responded to questions that require a negative answer, and he nodded his head no, and he responded to questions that require a positive answer, and he nodded his head yes, so this indicates that he's competent, then they write the get on his behalf and give it to his wife based on the nod of the head because they've tested that that really is his desire. That's the Mishnah. Here's the Gemara on Mishnah number 1 in chapter 7. The Gemara asks, what is the nature of this temporary insanity, this kordiakos, mentioned in the Mishnah? So we have a language note here. Kordiakos, spelled out in Greek, mentioned in the Mishnah, right? So the Mishnah is written in Hebrew, generally. The Mishnah is in Hebrew, and the Gemara is in Aramaic. So when we read something in the Mishnah, we expect it to be in Hebrew. But this word, kordiakos, kind of sounds Greek, doesn't it? And it is imported from Greek, and it is from the Greek kordiakos, meaning pertaining to the heart, right? Cardiac surgeon, cardiologist, that's pertaining to the heart. Therefore, this is a heart disease. Now, according to both our sages and the ancient Greeks, the heart was the seat of human intellect. Therefore, the term heart disease was used to describe mental illness. Isn't that fascinating, right? So for them, the seat of the intellect was in the heart. Now you could say, well, they lived so long ago, they didn't have our advanced anatomical knowledge, and they didn't realize that the gray matter between your ears is where our thoughts reside, and they were so primitive. How could they think that the heart is the seat of the intellect? But I think if we give this further thought, there is some beautiful wisdom to be gained from this idea. And I'm thinking specifically of times in my life where I apprehended something, I understood something emotionally before I understood it intellectually. Right? The heart has its secrets. The heart has its knowledge. The heart has its understanding. And I can remember some specific times where I started to feel an emotion, a very strong emotion, and it was like, what's going on? Why am I feeling that? And only a few minutes later, or quite a few minutes later, I put it together. Oh, this is what's going on. This, what people are doing around me, or a situation that's developing around me. And the heart jumped to that knowledge way ahead of the brain. So that was an interesting lesson to me. But this idea that a passing insanity rests in the heart, crimes of passion come to mind as well. And that's really not where we're going. We're not talking about criminal law at all. That's off the subject of tonight. But at any rate, it's interesting that etymologically, that's this word that is used. Now, when they're talking about this passing insanity, they're not talking about, somebody's just carried away with their emotions, and then they're going to use some kind of insanity justification. They mean true insanity, like this person is possessed by something, is out of their normal mind and can't help it, and would never make decisions in their normal state of being that they would make in the state of this passing insanity. That is what they're talking about. Now that could happen, because of a literal physical disease, or as we've seen, the sages will go to the place of a demonic possession. Not necessarily the way that's understood, in other cultures and times. It's not the same as the Exorcist movie type like that. But that's actually not where they're going here. Here they're just saying it's a given. The guy has a passing insanity. So if he says, divorce my wife during that period, he doesn't get a divorce because he's not himself. Physically not himself. Okay. So the Gemara asks, what is the nature of this kordiakos, this passing insanity that is mentioned in our Mishnah? And Shmuel said the reference is to one who was afflicted by drinking new wine that came directly from the wine press. So it's perhaps some kind of an alcohol poisoning. Not just somebody who's intoxicated, somebody who is poisoned, right? It's some kind of a poisoning. So it's the reference is to one who was afflicted by drinking new wine that came directly from the wine press. And the Gemara asks, and let the Tana, the rabbi, the Mishnah, then teach explicitly with regard to one who was afflicted by drinking this new wine. And the Gemara answers, this teaches us that the name of the demon that causes this insanity is kordiakos, right? So one idea is this just physical poisoning, and right away another idea is that a demon enters you and causes this passing insanity. And the Gemara asks, well, what's the difference between these two? And the Gemara answers, the difference is with regard to an amulet to prevent harm caused by the demon. The amulet must include the name of the demon. And the Gemara asks, what is the remedy for that illness? And the Gemara responds, the afflicted person should eat red meat, roasted over coals, and drink wine diluted with a large amount of water. Abaye said, my mother told me that the remedy for a day-old fever, now that we're talking about remedies, my mother told me that the remedy for a day-old fever, i.e. one who contracted a fever that very day, is drinking a jug of water. The remedy for a fever that is 2 days old, right, it came on yesterday, the remedy is bloodletting. The remedy for a fever that one has had for 3 days is eating red meat, roasted over coals, and drinking diluted wine. For an old fever that lasts for an extended period of time, the remedy is to bring a black hen, tear it lengthwise and widthwise, shave the middle of the sufferer's head, and place the hen upon it, and leave the hen upon his head until it adheres to his head due to the blood. And let him descend into the water, and let him stand in the water up to his neck, until the world appears faint for him, i.e. until he feels faint. And then let him submerge himself in the water and emerge from the water and sit and rest. And if he is not able to undergo this process, let him eat leeks and descend into the water and stand in the water up to his neck until the world appears faint for him. And let him submerge himself in the water and emerge from the water and sit and rest. The remedy for a fever is eating red meat that was roasted over coals and drinking diluted wine. A remedy for the chills is eating fatty meat that was roasted over coals and drinking undiluted wine. And it was related when the members of the exilarch's house would afflict Rav Amram the pious, they would make him lie down to sleep all night on the snow. And the next day they would say to him, what is preferable for the master, meaning for Rav Amram? What is preferable for us to bring him to eat? And Rav Amram said to himself, anything I say to them, they will do the opposite. So he said to them, "Bring me red meat roasted over coals and diluted wine." So they brought him fatty meat roasted over coals and undiluted wine instead, which is what Rav Amram had intended, because this is the remedy for one who suffers from the chills. So curious that the members of the exilarchs, right? So the exilarch was the head of the Jewish community in Babylonia, that the members of his house would afflict Rav Amram the pious. That's not explained. Yeah. Okay. So then they gave him what he wanted. Now, with regard to chills and fatty meat, we have a note from Rav Steinsaltz. One who is exposed to the cold for a dangerously long time must be quickly supplied with enough caloric intake for his body to function properly and to overcome the effects of hypothermia. Fatty meat and undiluted wine are sources of ready energy, as they are digested more quickly than foods which are high in fiber, such as vegetables. Even in later periods of history, people suffering from the cold were given liquids with a high concentration of alcohol for this very purpose. Now, Yalta, the wife of Rav Nachman, heard what the members of the exilarch's house did, and that Rav Amram was suffering from the chills. And she brought him to the bathhouse and placed him in the water of the bathhouse until the water of the bathhouse turned red like blood, and his flesh became covered with spots that looked like coins. It is related when Rav Yosef suffered from the cold, he would work by grinding with millstones in order to keep warm. And when Rav Sheshes suffered from the cold, he would work by lifting beams. And he said, "Great is labor as it warms its master." I will say that you guys remember Bear Grylls? This survivalist guy used to have a TV show. They would drop him off with, just himself and his clothes and maybe a pocket knife, like in the middle of the Alaskan tundra, and he would always make a shelter first and then get some food. And one thing that he used to say is if you have to cross through an icy stream, right? So first of all, you take your clothes off so that the clothes are going to be dry when you get to the other side, and then because to battle the hypothermia when you get so cold, do a bunch of push-ups, right? Get the blood flowing through the body, and that's very effective when you're really, really cold. Now, the Gemara relates another incident of the house of the exilarch. The exilarch said to Rav Sheshes, "What is the reason that the master, i.e. Rav Sheshes, does not eat with us?" And he said to them, "Because the slaves of this household do not act according to a high standard, and they are suspected of transgressing the prohibition against eating a limb severed from a living animal." That's not only prohibited for a Jew, that's prohibited for any human being under the Noahide laws, to sever a limb from a living animal and eat that. So the exilarch, right? The exilarch is like royalty in Babylonia. So, you're getting the picture here. Often the exilarch was somebody like Mar Ukva, who was a sage himself. But in addition to those responsibilities as the head of the Jewish community, it was a political office, and it was like a big, like a governor, with a big mansion and an administrative building and many people answering to him, and he was just responsible politically and administratively for the Jewish community, and would have to answer, to the king of Persia. In relating to matters of the Jewish community. So he's like, it's a big responsibility. But he had, of course, a friendship and a relationship with the sages. So now we have Rav Sheshes, the very, holy and wise Rav Sheshes, who doesn't want to eat in the exilarch's home. And when asked why, he says, your slaves, they are suspected of eating limbs from living animals. This is a very serious accusation. So the exilarch said to him, "Who says that this is so?" Rav Sheshes said to the exilarch, "I will now show you." So Rav Sheshes said to his own servant, "Go steal one leg from the animal that the servants of the exilarch's household slaughtered for a meal and bring it to me. Right, so imagine that they slaughtered a lamb, or a kid goat, depending on how big the meal is, maybe a whole goat. So there's going to be 4 legs of that animal. That's going to, the animal's going to be butchered and cut up, etc. So he tells his own servant, steal one of those legs from the kitchen. Why? Why is he doing that? He says, steal one leg from the animal that the servants have slaughtered and bring it to me. Right? That animal's already been slaughtered. It's being prepared in the kitchen. So his servant's just going to the kitchen and taking one of the legs. Rav Sheshes' servant brought one leg to him, and afterward Rav Sheshes said to the servants of the exilarch's household, set out the portions of the animal for me. So they brought him only 3 legs and placed them before him. They said, I want to see the whole meal. So they brought it out, and there's only 3 legs, right? Because his own servant took one of the legs. So Rav Sheshes says to the servants, did this animal have only 3 legs? When the servants heard this, they cut one leg from another living animal, and they brought it and placed it before Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes said to his servant, now bring out the leg that you took from the kitchen. And he placed the leg on the table. And then Rav Sheshes says to the servants of the exilarch, did this animal have 5 legs? So the exilarch realized that he could not rely on the servants of his household. He said to Rav Sheshes, well, if so, they should prepare the meat in the presence of my master's servant, and then you can eat without concern. So the exilarch is saying to Rav Sheshes, okay, have your servant supervise the kitchen, be a mashgiach, right? Make sure that everything's done in a kosher manner. Rav Sheshes said to the exilarch, very well. They brought a table before them, and they brought the meat before him. And the servants placed a small bone in the meat before Rav Sheshes so that it would cause him to choke. Right? The servants had been embarrassed that they were caught in their, illicit ways. I mean, really, Mar Ukva should have the exilarch should have just fired them and got new servants, but maybe it was a little bit too close to the banquet to do that. So they were allowed to continue serving, and now, because they'd been exposed by Rav Sheshes, he became their enemy, and they slipped a little bone into his food so that he should choke and die. Since Rav Sheshes was blind, now you understand why he has this servant to do all the observing for him, they thought that he would be unable to notice the bone, but he felt it. And he took the entire piece of meat that contained that little bit of bone, and he wrapped it in his scarf out of concern that he would be hurt by the small bones that he could not see. After the meal, the servants realized what Rav Sheshes had done, and they wanted to show the exilarch that Rav Sheshes did not eat the meat that was given to him. Like, oh, okay, we got him. He didn't eat the meat. We can accuse him of being ungrateful. So therefore, after making this whole production and now having, all the previous meat thrown out, and now his own servant supervising everything, and after all of that, he didn't eat the meat, right? So again, trying to embarrass him in front of the exilarch. So therefore, the servants said to their master, the exilarch, now we're on 68a, a silver cup was stolen from us. Almost like the accusation, right, that Joseph's servant made when, they framed Benjamin in order to see how the older brothers would react. So now the servants say, a silver cup has been stolen. So what do you do if the silver cup has been stolen? Now you conduct an exhaustive search. Did they think a silver cup had been stolen? No. But the exhaustive search revealed that piece of meat with the bones in it that Rav Sheshes had hidden in his scarf. So the exilarch's servant said to the exilarch, you see, master, i.e. the exilarch, master, Rav Sheshes does not desire to eat. Rather, he wishes only to afflict us. He made all this to do, not because he was hungry, wanted to eat, but he just did it to bother us. He's been, lying to you all along. Even after everything that was done for him, he did not eat. Rav Sheshes said to the servants, I ate, and I tasted the taste of white leprous spots in the meat, and therefore I did not eat it. They said to the exilarch, we did not prepare an animal with white spots today. Rav Sheshes said to them, check the skin in the place of the portion that I was given. He issued this instruction in accordance with the statement of Rav Sheshes. As Rav Sheshes said, black spots within white skin and white spots within black skin are an affliction and a sign of disease. They checked and found that the animal was afflicted in this manner, and the exilarch's servants became even angrier with Rav Sheshes. Now he's exposed them twice. When Rav Sheshes was exiting the house of the exilarch, the servants dug a pit and placed a reed mat on top of it. A reed mat here is known as a tzifta. And they placed a reed mat on top of it so that the pit would not be noticed. In other words, it's a trap, and they want Rav Sheshes to walk over the mat and fall in the pit. And they said to Rav Sheshes, the master, meaning in this case Rav Sheshes, should come and rest for a short time. And they intended for him to fall and be hurt. Rav Sheshes, who was also present, snorted, nechar. In other words, he made a sound, he snorted, or he'd be like, ahem, that kind of thing, in order to signal to Rav Sheshes that something was up. Maybe he wasn't sure exactly what, but he said something's up. So Rav Sheshes said to a child who happened to be there, recite your verse for me, meaning what did you learn today in the Heder? What verse did you learn from Scripture today? And the child said to him, turn to your right or your left, from 2 Samuel 2:21. So Rav Sheshes, who was blind, said to his servant, what do you see? And his servant said to him, I see a mat that has been placed on the ground. Rav Sheshes said to him, turn away from it, and we will go around it. After Rav Sheshes left the exilarch's house, Rav Sheshes said to him, from where did the master know that the servants had dug a pit in that place? And Rav Sheshes said to him, there were several matters that raised my suspicions. One, that the master, in this case meaning Rav Sheshes, snorted to me, signaling that I should be beware. And additionally, when the child recited the verse for me, it alluded to this matter. Go to the right or the left, but not straight. And additionally, servants are suspect of not acting according to a high standard. And I suspected that they would attempt to cause me harm, especially after I'd exposed them. That's the end of the story. Now, having mentioned the spirit kordiakos on the previous daf, right? So some say that kordiakos is just heart disease and another name for passing insanity. And some say that kordiakos is actually a demon that gets into your heart, right? And takes over your behavior. So having mentioned the spirit named kordiakos on the previous page, the Gemara relates other matters connected to spirits and demons. Now it is written, Ecclesiastes 2:8, I got myself sharim and sharot, and human pleasures, shida and shidot. Right? So Ecclesiastes, Kohelet in Hebrew, understood to be narrated by King Solomon, and saying, what does he say? If you read the book of Ecclesiastes, I had it all. I was king in Jerusalem. I was rich beyond measure. I had wives beyond counting. I had power immeasurable. And at the end, what good was it? None of it is good. All of this is in vain because a man is just destined to die. What is the point of acquisition? You can try love, you can try singing, you can try this, you can try that. And at the end of the day, what does it really mean? What does it really amount to? And the book ends. So at the end of the day, what do? You do what God tells you to do. You fulfill the commandments to the best of your ability. But in Ecclesiastes 2:8, the narrator is saying, I got for myself everything. Like when he says I was as rich beyond counting, so he lists some of the acquisitions that he had in his life. And so here he's listing some of the things that he acquired. Sharim and sharot, shida and shidot. So the Gemara explains, sharim and sharot, these are types of musical instruments. And human pleasures, these are pools and bathhouses. Shida and shidot, here in Babylonia, they interpreted these words in the following manner. Male demons, shida, and female demons, shidetin. In the West, in Israel, they said that these words are referring to carriages. Okay, so we can understand that King Solomon had many carriages. But why would King Solomon acquire male and female demons as a possession for himself? Why would he want them? Why would he need them? So Rabbi Yochanan says there were 300 types of demons in a place named Shechin, but I do not know what the form or nature of a demon itself is. The master said, here they interpreted it: male demons and female demons. And the Gemara asks, why was it necessary for Solomon, the author of Ecclesiastes, to possess, to own male demons and female demons? And the Gemara answers, as it is written with regard to the building of Solomon's temple. For the house, when it was being built, it was built of a stone made ready at the quarry, and there was neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron heard in the house while it was being built. 1 Kings 6:7. Solomon said to the sages, how shall I make it so that the stone will be precisely cut, and yet I cannot use iron tools to cut it? And they said to him, there is a creature called a shamir, which is a worm that can cut the stones. And Moses used it to cut the stones of the ephod on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, when the children of Israel received the Torah at Mount Sinai, and the instructions, for elevating Aaron to the position of high priest and the special clothes a high priest would wear, and to cut the stones of the ephod, they used this worm, the shamir. So if you want to cut the stones of the temple, King Solomon, without using iron tools, you're going to need this worm, the shamir. So Solomon said to them, where is it found? He said to the sages, where is this worm found? And they said to him, bring a male demon and a female demon and torment them together. And it is possible that they know where the worm is found. And due to their suffering, when you torment them, they will reveal the place to you. So Solomon brought a male demon and a female demon and tormented them together. And they said, we do not know where to find the shamir. Perhaps Ashmidei, the king of the demons, knows. So right away our ears prick up. So Solomon had a question. He needed to find this worm in order to build the temple. The sages told him, well, you need a demon to tell you where that worm is found. So Solomon had a male demon and a female demon brought. I guess they were not so difficult to find in those days. So Solomon said to them, after they suggested that Ashmidei, the king of the demons, might know where the shamir is, he said to them, so where is Ashmidei? And they said to him, he is on such and such a mountain. He has dug a pit for himself there and filled it with water and covered it with a rock and sealed it with his seal. And every day he ascends to heaven and studies in the heavenly study hall, and he descends to the earth and studies in the earthly study hall. Right? This is not what we would have thought would be the day-to-day conduct of the king of the demons, learning in the heavenly yeshiva and learning even in the earthly yeshiva. Really? And he comes and checks the seal on his, on this pit under the mountain, and he checks the seal to ensure that nobody has entered the pit. And then he uncovers it and he drinks from the water in the pit, and then he covers it and seals it again, and he goes. So Solomon sent for Benayahu, the son of Jehoiada, a member of the royal entourage. Right? So this is a trusted advisor. And he gave Benayahu a chain onto which a sacred name of God was carved, and a ring onto which a sacred name of God was carved, and fleeces of wool, and wineskins of wine. What did Benayahu do? He went and dug a pit lower down the mountain, below the pit dug by Ashmidei, drained the water, and plugged it with the fleeces of wool, so that Ashmidei's pit was emptied. And he dug a pit higher up the mountain, above Ashmidei's pit, and he poured the wine into it so that the wine filled Ashmidei's pit. And he plugged the lower and upper pits that he dug. And he climbed up and he sat in a tree. When Ashmidei came, he checked his seal, which was complete, right? Nobody had broken the seal since he dug in from above and below. So he opened the pit, and he found it to be filled with wine. So he said that it is written, Proverbs 20, verse 1, wine is a mocker, strong drink is riotous, and whosoever wallows in it is not wise. And it is written, harlotry, wine, and new wine take away the heart, Hosea 4:11. So the king of the demons, Ashmidei, concluded, I will not drink this wine. Eventually, however, when he became thirsty, he was unable to resist the wine, and he drank, he became intoxicated, and he fell asleep. So that's how you trick and capture the king of the demons. Beniyahu descended from the tree, came, and he threw the chain, right, that had God's name carved on it, around Ashmidei and enclosed him within it. And when Ashmidei awoke, he struggled to remove the chain. And Beniyahu said to him, the name of your master is upon you. The name of your master is upon you. Do not tear the chain. God's name is written on this chain, and it is forbidden to destroy it. And the king of the demons desisted from breaking the chain, not because of some kind of charm that because God's name was written on it, he was unable physically to break the chain, but rather because if he broke the chain, he would desecrate the name of God. And the king of the demons was unwilling to do that. So we have a note here from Rav Sheshes. The fact that Ashmidei was unable to destroy the name of God by breaking the chain demonstrates the fundamental belief that even powers which appear to be evil, such as demons, ultimately derive their power from God, are subject to divine law, and are part of the divine plan. Right? There is only one God. There is only one creator in the world. Everything in the universe exists inside of God. God has power over everything. So, many times the question is asked, if God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all good, how can there be evil in the world? How does God tolerate evil in the world? Some would say, well, God is powerless to stop it. That's sacrilege. That's sacrilege. God has the power to do anything God wants. It's his world. It's God's dream. We're characters in his dream. He can do whatever he wants. God could end the world right now if he wants. He's continuously giving life to this world. So if there's evil in the world, it's part of the divine plan. Can we understand the divine plan? No, we cannot. It's one of our tenets of faith that when Mashiach comes, when the Messiah comes, we'll have a better understanding of why there was so much pain and suffering and tragedy and evil in the course of history. Some would say evil is actually the absence of good, right? Evil is something that comes from the humans, or perhaps from these characters, the demons. But elsewhere in the Talmud, we learn that demons are actually created from our sins, right? Like when we transgress, it's like that transgression has a lingering residue of the evil that we've done. And that lingering evil is what a demon actually is. That discussion is for another day. We can't understand why such terrible things happen in the world, but that in no way undermines the idea that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good. So here we see that even the king of the demons will not erase God's name. He is not in rebellion against God. He somehow has a job to do in this world. We just don't understand what it is all about. At any rate, now Beniyahu had captured the king of the demons. And he took him and came to Jerusalem. And he reached upon, so on the way to bring him before King Solomon, a bunch of things happened. So on the way to Jerusalem, when he came to Jerusalem, he reached a palm tree. And Ashmidei rubbed against it and knocked it down. He reached a house, and he knocked it down. He reached a small shack belonging to a certain widow. The widow emerged, and she begged Ashmidei not to knock down her house. And he bent his body away from her to the other side, and he broke one of his own bones rather than destroy the house of the widow. And he said, this is as it is written, Proverbs 25:15, soft speech can break a bone. Now we're on 68b. Ashmidei saw a blind man who was lost on the road, and he brought him to the correct road. He saw a drunk who was lost on the road, and he brought him to the correct road. He saw the joy of a wedding celebration in which they were celebrating, and he cried. He heard a certain man say to a shoemaker, "Make me shoes that will last for 7 years." And Ashmidei laughed. He saw a certain sorcerer performing magic, and he laughed. When Ashmidei arrived there in Jerusalem, they did not bring him before King Solomon until 3 days had passed. On the first day, he said to them, "Why doesn't the king want me to come to him?" And they said to him, he drank too much wine, and he drank too much and he was overcome by drink. Ashmidei took a brick and placed it on top of another brick. And the servants came and told King Solomon what the king of the demons had done. And Solomon interpreted the action, and he said to them, "This is what he said to you through this action. It is an illusion." He meant, return and give the king more drink. The following day, Ashmidei said to them, "And why doesn't the king want me to come to him?" And they said to him, "He ate too much and he was overcome by food." So Ashmidei took the brick off the other brick and he placed it on the ground. And the servants came and told Solomon what Ashmidei had done. And he interpreted Ashmidei's actions and said to them, "This is what he said to you through this illusion. Take the king's food away from him." At the end of 3 days, Ashmidei came before Solomon at last. Ashmidei took a reed and measured 4 cubits, and he threw it before King Solomon. And he said to Solomon, "See, when that man dies," meaning when Solomon dies, "he will have nothing in this world except the 4 cubits of his grave. And now you have conquered the entire world, and yet you are not satisfied until you also conquer me?" An interesting question from Ashmidei. You got everything. You're King Solomon. You're the richest, wisest, most powerful king who's ever lived. And you need me? You need to take me away from my affairs? Right? And in this story, what's the king of the demons doing? He's learning Torah in heaven and on earth. Why are you bothering him, King Solomon? So King Solomon says to Ashmidei, "I don't need anything from you." But he does. He needs some information, right? "I don't need anything from you. I want to build the temple. I need the shamir, the shamir worm, for this." So Ashmidei said to him, "The shamir was not given to me, but it was given to the angelic minister of the sea, the angel who has dominion over the sea. And he gives it only to the dukifat, right? The dukifat, right? The dukifat. Hold on a second. The dukifat. Where is it? The dukifat. I just want to pronounce it right. Where is it? The dukifat. The dukifat. I can't find it in the Hebrew right over here right now. I don't know why. Okay, at any rate, the dukifat, I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong, but the dukifat is sometimes translated as the wild rooster or as the hoopoe, and this is actually the national bird of Israel. Very, very beautiful little bird. Sort of its lower plumage, it looks like a zebra, and its upper plumage looks more like a mourning dove. A very interesting little bird. Okay, so remember the story so far. King Solomon wants to build a temple. He can't cut its stones with iron tools. The sages tell him you need a shamir, which is a worm that can cut stone. He says, "Well, where do I get the worm?" They said, "Ask a male and a female demon, torture them if you need to get the information." They said, "We don't know, but maybe the king of the demons knows, Ashmidei." They capture him. He says, "I don't know where that worm is, but I know that worm was given to the angel who has dominion over the sea. And he lends it out. Only to who? He gives it only to the dukifat, right? This bird, whom he trusts by force of his oath to return it." Why does the dukifat bird need the shamir? And what does the dukifat do with it? He brings it to the mountains that are not fit for habitation. and he places the shamir on the craggy rock, and the mountain splits. And he takes and he brings seeds of trees, throws them there, and it becomes fit for habitation. And this is why we interpret the word dukifat as cutter of mountains, Nagar Tura. And now you can see why this became the national bird of Israel, right? This idea that what this bird does, it takes, uninhabitable land, just desert or high desert, right? Mountainous desert where nothing grows. And he uses the worm to split the mountain, and then he brings seeds and plants and he makes it flourish, right? Much as the people have done in Israel. That really has, brought that land to life after it was just, desolate desert for so many centuries. Now, they investigated and they found the nest of a dukifat. It's just not called the dukifat, right? They're calling it the Tsar Nigola. But I like dukifat. I really do. Okay, so they investigated and found the nest of the dukifat, in which there were chicks. And he covered its nest with translucent glass. And when the dukifat came, and he wanted to enter the nest, and was unable to do so. So what did it do? It went and brought the shamir, worm, and placed it on top to crack the glass. And then Solomon's servant threw a clump of dirt at the dukifat, and the dukifat knocked over the shamir, and the man took it, and the dukifat went and strangled itself over the fact that it had not kept its oath to return the shamir to the angel that has dominion over the sea. Later, Benayahu said to Ashmidei, what is the reason that when you saw that blind man who was lost on the road, right? So remember these incidents that happened when they were bringing Ashmidei, the king of the demons, to Jerusalem, and he had a bunch of interactions with different people. So now they're trying to understand what it meant. What is the reason that when you saw that blind man who was lost on the road, you brought him to the correct road? And Ashmidei said to him, well, they proclaim about him in heaven that he is a completely righteous man, and anyone who does good for his soul shall merit to enter the world to come. And then Benayahu asked, well, what is the reason when you saw the drunk man who was lost on the road, you brought him to the correct road? And Ashmidei said to him, well, they proclaim about him in heaven that he is a completely wicked man. And I did good for his soul so that he will consume his reward in this world and not have any reward in the world to come. When we see the wicked prosper in this world, what we're seeing is that they're being rewarded for whatever little good they did during this lifetime, but they have nothing in store for them when they reach the world to come. And again, you see this idea, the demons, right? The demons cause havoc and evil. The king of the demons doesn't seem to be an evil creature at all. And this is in keeping. Now, this is not Satan. This is Ashmidei. But as we've talked about many times, Satan is an angel who is charged with acting as the prosecutor. He's very antagonistic to us, to the children, to the humans. And he brings accusations against us before the Lord. And he says, your children have acted wickedly. Your children have acted wickedly. And he will even tempt us into sin to show how wicked we can be. That's not Ashmidei's job. Ashmidei's job is to rule over the demons. But he's acting like a very righteous servant of Hashem. So what else did he do? So Benayahu asked him, and what is the reason that when you saw a drunk man, and asked him, and what is the reason that when you saw the joy of a wedding, you cried? And Ashmidei said to him, I knew that this man will die within 30 days. And his wife is required to wait for the Yavam. Now he's going to die childless. And the man's brother, who she's going to be obligated to under the laws of Yibum, is a child. So she's going to have to wait for him to reach the age of 13 before she can be released through Chalitza so that she can go and remarry and get on with her life. And so then Benayahu asked Ashmidei, and what is the reason that when you heard that man say to a shoemaker, make me shoes that will last for 7 years, and you laughed? And Ashmidei said to him, that man does not have 7 days to live. Does he need shoes that will last for 7 years? So you can see that this king of the demons is no, lowly demon who's just going around trying to do wickedness. This is an angel with tremendous sight, right? He can see, what the humans cannot see, what is not revealed to them, what is in store for certain humans, what is their fate, what is hidden from others that is known to them only. And Benyahu asked him, and what is the reason that when you saw that sorcerer performing magic, you laughed? And Ashmidei said to him, because that sorcerer was sitting on the king's treasury. Let him use his magic to know what is buried right there beneath him. Solomon kept Ashmidei with him until he completed building the temple. So having imprisoned Ashmidei with these chains that have God's name on them, he kept him there. Solomon does not look so great in this story. It's a little bit hard to understand. I'm sure that I'm not understanding it well enough. But Solomon was a complicated character. Not only did he write Ecclesiastes, but we know even in the Bible that late in his life, because he violated the Torah commandment, don't multiply wives, right? That's a commandment to a Jewish king, not to have too many wives. And Solomon did have many wives, and those wives, committed idolatry, and it became quite problematic, right? So Solomon is a little bit complicated. But at any rate, Solomon kept this Ashmidei with him until he completed building the temple. One day he stood with Ashmidei alone, and he said to Ashmidei, it is written, Numbers 24:8, for him like the lofty horns of the wild ox. And the sages say in explanation of this verse, like the lofty horns, these are the ministering angels. The wild ox, these are the demons. So Solomon says, in what way are you greater than us? Why does the verse praise your abilities and powers over those of human beings? He's asking Ashmidei, in what way are you greater than us? It's an interesting question because Ashmidei has already proven, a bunch of ways in which he's greater than humans. He can see the future. He can see what's hidden from the humans. He knew where the shamir would be, etc. But Solomon still asks this question. Ashmidei says to Solomon, take this chain off me. The chain with God's name. Take it off me. And give me your ring that has God's name engraved on it, and I will show you my strength. Curiosity is going to be a very dangerous thing here. Solomon, wanting to know exactly how is Ashmidei greater than human beings, takes the chain off him, and not only that, but gives him the king's ring, King Solomon's own ring. Ashmidei swallowed the ring, and he grew until he placed one wing in the heaven and one wing on the earth. Right? Ashmidei's true nature was revealed. I mean, he's an angel. They're in no way like us. Right? Now, what angels lack is free will. But in every other way, I mean, there's no comparison. An angel, if he wants, can take a form as big as the solar system, right? So he grew so that he had one wing, and now you can see Ashmidei's an angel. He has one wing in heaven and one wing on earth. And he threw Solomon a distance of 400 parasangs, to a great distance away from Jerusalem. Solomon was exiled from his own kingdom by a great, great distance. And with regard to that moment, Solomon said, Ecclesiastes 1:3, what profit is there for a person through all of his toil under the sun? With Solomon deposed from the throne, Ashmidei took his place. What does that mean? Did everyone not realize that Solomon was gone? No. Ashmidei just exiled Solomon instantly, like teleported him. 400 parasangs, like a tremendous distance away. And then Ashmidei took the form of Solomon. So Ashmidei, the king of the demons, an angel actually, now is ruling Israel, pretending to be Solomon. And Solomon is alone on the highway, way far away, with nothing to prove that he's the king. With regard to the verse, and this was my portion from all my toil, Ecclesiastes 2:10, the Gemara asks, What is the meaning of the expression, and this? Vezeh. This expression is always an allusion to an item that is actually in his hand or can be shown. He doesn't mean and this generally. He's saying and this. What does he mean by and this? And Rav and Shmuel disagree with regard to the meaning of this phrase. One said this is referring to Solomon's staff that remained in his hand. And another one said it is referring to his cloak. Solomon circulated from door to door, collecting charity. The mightiest king in history now is collecting charity. And wherever he arrived, he would say, I, Kohelet, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. Now we understand Ecclesiastes, right? Now we understand how the king came to be an ex-king, unknown, begging for charity, lost on the road. How could such a thing happen? Now we see. When he finally made his way back to Jerusalem and he arrived at the Sanhedrin, the sages said, now an imbecile does fixate on one matter all of the time? So what is this matter? Is this man perhaps telling the truth that he is Solomon? Right? This guy comes up and he says, I'm Solomon. They're like, well, there's the king on the throne. Who the heck are you? He says, no, that's not it. That's not Solomon. I'm Solomon. The sages said to Beniyahu, does the king require you to be with him? And Beniyahu said to them, no. So they sent to the queens, right? He had many queens. And they asked, does the king come to be with you? And the queens sent a response to them, yes, he comes. And they sent a request to the queens, check his feet to see if they are human feet. Apparently, Ashmidei can pretend to be Solomon, but not all the way down to his feet. So they said, check his feet. So the queens sent a response to the sages. Yeah, when he comes to see us, he's always wearing socks. It's impossible to see his feet. The queens continued discussing the king's behavior. And he demands of them, i.e. the queens, to engage in sexual intercourse when they are menstruating. King Solomon would never do that. And he also demands that Bathsheba, his mother, engage in sexual intercourse with him. Now you know it's not King Solomon. Once the Sanhedrin heard this, they understood that this was an impostor, not actually Solomon. So they brought Solomon and they gave him a ring and the chain on which the name of God was carved. And when Solomon entered, Ashmidei saw him and fled. I'm almost done. Comments or questions, get them in now. And the Gemara adds, and even so, although Ashmidei fled, Solomon was fearful of him. And this is as it is written, behold, the bed of Solomon, surrounded by 60 strong men from the warriors of Israel, all of them holding swords and trained in war, each man with his sword on his thigh, from fear in the nights. Song of Songs 3, 7, and 8. And Rav and Shmuel disagreed with regard to this story of Solomon. One said he was a king, and afterwards he became a commoner, and he never returned to his position as king. And the other one said he was a king, he became a commoner, and then he became a king again, as ultimately he returned to his throne and defeated Ashmidei. What a story. All right, let's take some comments and questions. On Gittin 68. Load. Ifa. It sounds as if new wine directly from the press could not be any kind of alcohol poisoning since alcohol has not had time to grow. Perhaps it is a fungus group found in the grapes or spoiled grapes. Something like that, right? I don't think we know exactly what it was. Or maybe, what they meant was it was almost like brandy. It was wine that was much too strong and hadn't been diluted properly. And so it was a kind of alcohol poisoning that way. And it's like somebody expected, to drink vodka and drank Everclear. I mean, you could be very harmed by that. Maybe it was something like that. I don't think we really understand. didn't Rav Sheshes cause this situation, which is against the Noahide laws? Very concerning. Oh, so interesting. In testing these servants that Rav Sheshes, realized, see, Rav Sheshes knew that they were doing this, or suspected that they were doing this. So he set up a situation to entrap them, and then they did it. But what you're saying is, well, he created a situation in which they might not have done it otherwise. I guess maybe the explanation would be, but they were continuously doing it, and by, catching them in flagrante, as it were, he was preventing it from happening again in the future. I think that's how I would understand it. Jonathan, from this story, I read that the demon inside of us laughs at the pain of others and revels in rebelling. We challenge people to challenge us and take advantage, and they take advantage until we do. Obviously, this is not a good trait, and even King Solomon is susceptible. What a beautiful interpretation, Jonathan. Very good. And finally, Joseph, just a contrast. In the ancient world, it seems they attributed all mental illness to spiritual properties, while in our psychology, they have de-spiritualized everything. What an interesting observation. Just so. I'll just finish by saying I have tremendous regard for science. I really grew up, my dad an engineer, my mom a professor of physics in his youth, and my mom, a trained licensed pharmacist and quite experienced as a chemist before she became a pharmacist. And I was just a science guy and a sci-fi, lover. And, I agree with Jerry Schroeder, and I highly recommend this book, Genesis and the Big Bang, and Maimonides, who would say there is no contradiction between science and Torah, right? If you find a contradiction between science and Torah, you are misunderstanding one or the other or both. Maimonides believed that science is, the study of nature and measuring, right? The study of science should only increase our appreciation of God's creation and what he's done for us and what he continually does for us. And tragically in modern times, there's been this kind of offering, people offer up science as a replacement for spirituality, a replacement for God. It was never intended to be that at all. And I think that as we move into the future, people will gradually come to see, and as many physicists, and cosmologists have already come to see, that once you get into the most fundamental particles, the most fundamental building blocks of our physical universe, it's so mysterious that it just, they find their spirituality anew, shall we say. And, science tends to explain how things happen, not why, right? That is the realm of the tradition. So, my friends, may we be blessed to keep learning and growing in wisdom. And as we grow in wisdom, remember this lesson of Solomon, that even the wisest man who ever lived, had to ever be careful or he could fall from that lofty position. Recall, tomorrow we will meet at 6 p.m., but we'll have a reading of the Book of Lamentations for Tisha B'Av. Thursday, we will not have class during the fast, and then we'll resume on Friday with the daf at the regular Friday time of noon Pacific, or as close to it as possible, since I'm having my sutures removed that morning. Have a great night.